Welcome to Brampton Focus. My next guest is a leader of a party that is on the rise in provincial politics. In the last election, they maintained a 21-seat representation in the provincial legislature and 20% of the popular vote. My name is Michael A. Charbon. Next on Brampton Focus, we meet Andrea Horwath, leader of the provincial New Democratic Party, here on Brampton Focus. And welcome back to Brampton Focus. My next guest was born and raised in Hamilton, Ontario, and went to McMaster University. In 1997, was elected as a Hamilton City Councillor for Ward 2, and was re-elected again in 2000 and 2003. Provincial politics came a calling, as they would say, and in 2004 won a landslide victory in the Hamilton East legislative position, if you wish, with 63.3% of the popular vote, a landslide. In 2007, there was a newly created riding in Hamilton Centre, which she won as well. And in 2008, she started her campaign to be the leader of the New Democratic Party. In 2009, she was chosen as a provincial leader, and notably was the first woman to actually lead the NDPs. In 2011, she was re-elected and saw a really significant rise in the NDP support in Ontario, with almost 20% of the popular vote, quite an accomplishment. And she put Dalton McGuinty's Liberal in a minority. Many people today would appreciate that same position, some would say. In 2012, the NDP Leadership Review, lots of hoopla, you read all the press, 76% of the NDP rank and file supported the leader and put her in charge of the party yet once again. And in 2014, she was re-elected again and maintained her 21 seats in the provincial parliament. My guest is Miss Andrea Horwath, leader of the New Democratic Party and representative for Hamilton Centre, Ontario. Miss Horwath, thank you for coming.
It's my pleasure, Michael.
I'm going to get right to the nitty-gritty of it. I mean, we talk about budget, we talk about kitchen table politics. Ontario now is looking at a $307 billion budget. In 2018, they're looking at $1 billion per month in interest alone. We're already at $10.2 billion at 3%. What can Ontario do to stymie us being in the ditch? Because we're in the ditch.
So there's a couple of different things, right? I mean, when you look at a budget, you don't only look at the expenditure side, you look at how that expenditure is happening, absolutely. Are there things that you need to do differently, or are there things that you need to kind of pare back in? But the other side of the equation is, are there ways to generate more revenue as well? And I think one of the things that is concerning is that this government made a promise in the last election that they were going to tackle the deficit without touching healthcare and education. And we all know that this province is seeing significant reductions in investment when it comes to healthcare, something that is one of the basic services that people should be able to expect from their government. And it's very, very worrisome because as our population grows, we are not keeping up with the healthcare services that are necessary, and we're not even keeping up with inflation. But on the other hand, there are definitely ways that this government spends that need to be put in check. I mean, on infrastructure, for example, the Auditor General. You know, it's interesting. Can I take a little tangent?
Sure. No, for
sure. So the Auditor General, people often, can't wait for the Auditor General's report because it's going to be explosive and there's going to be all kinds of criticisms of the government. But the report is actually supposed to be a blueprint on how to do things better, right? How to organize your way of providing services in a way that's more fiscally responsible.
Right.
That's what that report is supposed to do.
Well, and transparency, because that was part of what they ran on, right?
Absolutely. But what we have instead is this government, it criticizes the Auditor General's report instead of saying, you're correct. We spent $2 billion on smart meters that gave us nothing in terms of value instead of the $1 billion that we said we were going to spend on smart meters. Or you're right, we spent $8.2 billion more in infrastructure spending than we should have because of the way we're financing our projects. So there are ways, and there are officers of the legislature that are there to help government provide better value for money. And it's a big part of it is value for the money that we're spending. This government has no qualms about the way that they spend
Are politicians not immune to the word billions? I mean, you've said the word billion, what, 4 times in the last description?
That's real money.
Yeah, but are we immune? I mean, the amount of money that we are indebted, when we say billions and billions, you think it's $1 billion a month in interest alone. How do you tackle that? Because the first thing people say when you want to make changes or when you want to make, oh, don't take that from me. How do you do that?
Well, but it is a matter of prioritization. There's no doubt about it. And again, I go back to acknowledging that there are basic fundamentals that people expect their government to be able to deliver, right? I mean, people expect that your healthcare system should be there for you when you need it. I mean, I would say that if there's one priority that everyone has, it's their health and the health of their family. That should be the priority for the government too. And unfortunately, that's not what we're seeing here in Ontario. So it's a matter of prioritizing
I can quote you on the healthcare. I can quote you on the healthcare. You said that major hospitals are already overcrowded and forcing patients to wait for healthcare that they need. Right now, we can look at the province's hospitals are overburdened and not enough money. I mean, the Liberals have said they're going to spend $2.4 billion in investing in healthcare, and we see that there's hospital beds. I mean, Patrick Brown was talking about Brampton Civic. They service 140,000 people a year. They're only built to service 90.
And so it's interesting because I was at the hospital today taking a tour and seeing how they've tried to adapt to the pressures. But in a growing region like Peel region, I mean, you have to recognize that we have a growing population here, significant growing population, and you can't just not invest in the services that people need. But the issue becomes, how is that investment actually reaching the front line of our healthcare system? So again, the government this time threw around the $1 billion figure in terms of their investment, but where is it going? I mean, we see CEOs in their hospitals right now
I'm going to talk about
making close to $1 million a year to be a CEO of a hospital.
$1.6 million was the head of Hydro Wind.
That's right.
I mean,
do you know what it is in Quebec, which is an all-public system? It's for less than 400,000.
So why, I mean, I was going to talk about the Sunshine List, and we're going to talk about the LCBO and Hydro, but just in a quick little snippet with about 30 seconds, would you ever consider introducing a ceiling of corporate...
We've done it a couple of times. We've actually, of CEO salaries, we've introduced legislation at least 2 or 3 times, probably more. I've introduced the bills myself. 10 years ago, this Liberal government said that they were going to cap the CEO salaries and the top administrative salaries.
But they all say, oh, but industry standard says we have to pay them.
But that's not true. So if the Quebec CEO can make 400,000 or less, if the CEO of a major regional hospital in BC, for example, can earn $350,000, why do our CEOs have to earn $1 million?
Well, because they think if you work,
1.6 million,
they think if you work for the government, it's a huge paycheck.
It should be a public service.
Well, if you combine that to the private sector, it's definitely different. My name is Michael A. Sherbone. You're watching Brampton Focus, joined by Andrea Horwath when we continue our discussion back with Brampton Focus. And welcome back to Brampton Focus. It began in 1934 and it was called the CCF, the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation. The New Democratic Party of Ontario was formed in 1961 by a gentleman named Donald C. MacDonald. Other famous names that you may remember, Stephen Lewis. We all remember Stephen Lewis. And Bob Rae. Remember Rae days? Well, actually, Bob Rae formed the very first NDP provincial government in 1990. And then there was also Howard Hampton, and of course, my next guest, who has been the leader of the NDP since 2009. That's seven years as the leader of the New Democratic Party, Madame Andrea Horwath. You're a fun lady to talk to off camera. Very happy, very jovial. It's wonderful to the human aspect. Not that politicians aren't human, but it's very nice to speak with you. When we were talking about some of the perils that we're seeing that is taking place, and one of them is hospital care and our hospitals. I mean, you said that major hospitals are already overcrowded and forcing patients to wait for the care that they need. The government says that they put billions of dollars in health care. Where's the proof in the pudding?
Well, so here's the issue. The hospitals have been frozen for 4 years straight, 0% increase, even while costs are going up. Even in your own home, you know that costs have gone up. Hydro is just one of them, which we'll probably talk about later.
Yes, ma'am.
But the costs are going up, but the funding has remained static, which means the hospitals have had to cut to be able to maintain their budgets. That's a problem because the cuts affect patient care. In the first year or two, not much was said, but now those hospitals have cut to the bone, and so we have patients that are stuck in emergency rooms for very long periods of time who are not getting the procedures that they need in a timely fashion. And I found out by just talking to patients the last little while, how are they being held over when their procedures can't be done on time? They're being prescribed painkillers and extra drugs to be able to hold them over, which is not what we need for the people of this province. And so we have to make sure that we're funding our hospitals at a rate that covers off inflation as a bare minimum, as well as population growth. And for this region, the population growth piece is extremely important because we know how much of a burgeoning community the Peel region is.
Well, thank goodness for Orlando Corporation, who has come up and helped fund the new hospital here in Brampton. But for all intents and purposes, it's really not a hospital per se. It's a glorified drop-in clinic to a certain extent. We need to get more funding. This region is populated. How would you take care of that? Because there's people who are saying that there are patients in hallways that are waiting to be treated.
Well,
How would you help us in Brampton?
Well, I mean, one of the things that we have to do, as I said already, is keep a baseline funding that allows the hospitals to do their job at a bare minimum. And so that's covering off inflation and population growth. You have to be able to fund hospitals so that they can expand their service to meet the demand of a growing population. But we also have to stop firing nurses. 1,440 nurses have been fired in this province since the beginning of last year. That's 3 nurses a day. That's 90 nurses a month being fired by this government. Now, those are the folks that assist the doctors in the hospital. They're the people that provide you that bedside care. They're the backbone of our healthcare system. And not only are they being fired, but now new nurses who are graduating are looking to other provinces as well as across the border for work because they see how unstable our healthcare system here is in Ontario.
That's a tragic thing. I'm going to quickly switch gears here for about a minute and 20 seconds left. We touched on this earlier. It's about the Sunshine List. $1.6 million is being paid to the chief. The chief guy who's running our hydro. Some of the people at Pan Am were paying $760,000. When you talk about pay overages, the director of the TDSB, $600,000. We have to do something, first of all, to curb these egregious CEO payments. Is that
right,
something
Michael.
that the NDP would do?
No, you're absolutely right, Michael. And in fact, we have tried to get the government to do this. We have, I myself personally, have tabled at least 2 bills, so 2 pieces of legislation to put a cap on the CEO and top administrative salaries in the public sector. The Liberals, in response, keep saying we're going to do something. We're going to address this issue. For 10 years, they've been saying they're going to do something, and they've done nothing. And we still have these CEOs that are making exorbitant amounts of salary and perks and benefits, while the frontline workers, like the nurses, are being laid off. That is not the best way to fund a healthcare system.
I'll tell you, the mayor in Brampton took $50,000 off her pay because she wanted to set an example. When we come back, our final segment with Madam Andrea Horwath, leader of the New Democratic Party, and we're going to talk about the selling of Ontario. What? Oh yeah, we're selling Ontario. My name is Michael A. Charbon. We'll be back with more right after this. And welcome back to Brampton Focus. Sherry DeNovo said that the federal NDP has lost its way, that Mulcair is tainted. Now that's federal politics, the federal NDP. Well, TVO's Stephen Paikin said on May 16th, he said one of the worst kept secrets at Queen's Park is that Bramalea Gore-Malton MPP Jagmeet Singh, who is a good friend of Brampton Focus, is considering a bid for the federal NDP. We didn't have time to do a Skype interview with him, but interestingly enough, the Ontario NDP leader, Andrea Horwath, supposedly gave him a promotion to deputy leader to the provincial caucus in order to keep him from bolting to the federal NDP earlier. My guest today, Andrea Horwath, final segment. Well, is Jagmeet going to bolt? Did you really offer him that? Is Steve Paikin right?
I mean, it's really interesting how the commentators know what's happening at Queen's Park more than those of us who are there. But look, one of the things that I was really conscious of is the growing population in the Peel region, and the fact that the NDP doesn't have that many members. In fact,
He's
the only member
one
we have is Jagmeet Singh.
He is the lone orange island.
If I want to connect with this community more, if I want to find ways to have discussions with people in the Peel region more, if I want to create a space for the NDP to become more tied to this region, then the best way for me to do that is to use the resources that I have. And so when I talked to Jagmeet about becoming the deputy leader, I made it clear that part of the reason for doing that is because he is such an amazing conduit, if you will, to what's happening in the Peel region, what's happening in the community. And he's an invaluable resource for our caucus and for our party. And so it was out of respect for him and what he can not only bring to the NDP, but what he can bring to the people of Peel region in terms of having one of the opposition parties have a strong voice on their behalf, and he's done that very, very well. So I was pleased to make him the deputy leader to help us to make those connections and to make sure that the voice of people in the Peel region represented by the NDP could be strong and vocal and prominent.
Well, there is no better example of the Peel region of a politician who interacts with his constituents, and I've always enjoyed, so has Brampton Focus, having Jagmeet on us. He's a very very good straight shooter, and an excellent representative.
Solid, he's a solid guy.
And a good choice, and don't go to the federal, don't go to the dark side. So let's talk about selling Ontario. That's what I wanted to touch on. The Liberals now, Hydro One, they're talking about the OLG, they're talking about the LCBO. When you look at Hydro One, it really is a moneymaker. I mean, roughly $750 million a year in total profits. That's just for Hydro One. And its earning rate in return of equity is between 10 and 11%. Shouldn't we all be so lucky to make that much? The Liberals are selling 60% of Hydro One utility to a private investor. And after paying off the utilities debt somewhere between $3.3 and $5 billion, they will have a cash cow. How can we let this go on? They're doing this because they're trying to show everybody they're reducing the budget, but I mean,
and so this kind of reflects back on part of our earlier discussion. I mean, you can't put us on better financial footings if you're selling off a revenue-generating asset. This is something that even our financial accountability officer has said to the government is the wrong direction. It puts us in a worse financial position than by keeping that asset and having it work for Ontarians. But that's not only it. 85% of Ontarians think this is the wrong thing to do. Kathleen Wynne and the Liberals ran an election and didn't tell anybody that this was on their plans. They didn't tell anybody.
So you've been having town halls, you've been talking to people?
All over the province, absolutely.
And you've been talking to the people, and what have they been saying to you?
Well, people are angry, they're worried, they're upset. They know, first of all, that it's going to increase the electricity bills, because that's happened everywhere where you've seen, the privatization of a hydro system. Always it causes rates to go up, and we already have some of the highest rates going. I mean, Quebec and Manitoba, our neighboring provinces, both kept their public system, and both of those provinces have electricity rates at half or less than our rates here in Ontario.
So what do we do?
Well, I mean, we're continuing to get petitions. We're continuing to have town halls. We're trying to get the province to stop where they are. Now, they're already at 30%. They say they're going to sell off another 30%. We're going to continue to fight against that, and we'll see where we end up. But it is unfathomable that this government is basically thumbing their nose not only at 85% of Ontario, but at their responsibility, their duty, because not only is this hydro asset something that's owned by the public, but it's for future generations as well.
Is the OLG next, the Ontario Lottery Corporation? Is the LCBE next? LCBO next? We can't do this because they're selling it for short-term gain, for long-term pain, because we're going to end up being in the ditch.
You're right. You're absolutely
So
right.
what do we do? I mean, is it time for an election? Get them out.
Well, I mean, and it's 2 years away, unfortunately.
Right.
So
and
there's a lot of pain, a lot of damage that can happen. So for those of you who have MPPs that are in the Liberal caucus or that are Liberal members or MPPs, phone them, let them know. Make sure that they're aware of how you feel, because ultimately people have to get reelected, or they want to get reelected, and they're not going to get reelected if their entire community is up in arms over what they're doing.
When you talk about people up in arms and a community getting together, as of late, the demonstrations on autism, the spectrum of autism goes so wide-based. I've been very fortunate to go to several Autism Speaks. Gala's one that is held every year downtown, and they raise great money. But we've got a problem. We've got autism that continually increases, but they're reducing money and reducing fundings. What do we do about this, Andrea?
Well, I mean, this is a very serious and an inhumane situation from my perspective. Look, there are kids that have been on the wait list for a particular therapy called IBI for years. They've been kids that were literally born onto the wait list, if you will. So for 13 years in office, this government has done nothing to deal with the autism file, if you want to call it that. Those
it's a spectrum. There's so much of it,
right? It's a spectrum disorder, right? And so there's quite a variance in terms of the needs of kids. But IBI therapy is shown to be very effective for kids to help them make sense of the world, to help them communicate in the rest of the environment. But what the government's done is, instead of trying to address the waiting list and get these kids the therapies they need, they've arbitrarily said, if you're over 4 years old, you're no longer eligible in Ontario for IBI therapy. So all of these
but we have free health care. That's part of that.
Well, all of these kids that have been waiting on the wait list to get the treatment that's going to unlock, their abilities, are now they're kicked off, so that the government can say, well, we don't have a wait list anymore. Meanwhile, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids are basically doomed because the therapy is extremely expensive, and that's the other point. These families sell their homes, they sell their belongings, they do everything. They seek
alternative medical advice from the United States, etc.
They just to try to get the kids what they need.
So there is a passion that burns in you, Ms. Horwath. I can see that. What's next for you with about 2 minutes left? Where is the provincial NDP going? Where do you see yourself in the next election?
Well, I have to say that one of the things that I'm still passionate about, if you want to say, is making sure that government serves the people. And I think that the track that this government is on is not serving the people at all. It's all about priorities. It's all about making sure that you're taking care of the fundamentals. And I believe those fundamentals are pretty clear. It's about decent health care, where you getting it where you can, where you need it, when you need it, no matter who you are, no matter how much money you make, no matter where you live, you should be able to rely on our healthcare system, correct?
Right.
The other big one is education, and again, there has been lots of concern around education and the way that it's being delivered. Again, special needs kids are a big part of the problem, and some of the places where the government has fallen down on the job. If there's another huge one, it's jobs in our economy. I mean, let's face it, people are working 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet. Folks are at the mercy of these temp agencies that are kind of scooping their wages off the top. There needs to be real work done around how to make our job environment one where people can actually earn a living. They can put a roof over their head. They can feed their families.
I want to thank you so much for being here. I know you had to make a special trip. Brampton Focus is indebted to you to come out. We really appreciate what you're doing.
I spent the whole day in Brampton, and so thank you.
There you are. Andrea Horwath, leader of the New Democratic Party. We thank you for being here with us today. We look forward to your comments and your criticisms. If you have any topics or questions, please go to our Facebook page or bramptonfocus.ca. My name is Michael A. Charbon. Thank you for spending the time with us. We look forward to seeing you again soon.